Our working definition this week for a dogfight is a ferocious struggle for supremacy. A ferocious struggle for supremacy. In the last episode, we talked about becoming ferocious, which for me means creating density to your intensity. I don't want a fleeting intensity, man. I want to be intense all the time, and I want that intensity to be deep. I want it to be dense. And today I want to talk to you about that very struggle itself. Again, ferocious means a dogfight means a ferocious struggle for supremacy. So we've got to talk about how to create some of that ferocity within us. But we are, we're dealing with a dogfight, which is a daily battle. These are the battles we've got to win. This is where the struggle begins and ends. So what is a struggle? I always find it helpful to define terms. What is a struggle? It means striving to attain something in the face of difficulty or resistance. Struggle is striving to attain something in the face of difficulty or resistance. And that's what we're after, man. We want to win that struggle so that we can obtain and then maintain the supremacy. You want the supremacy over everything that you're facing. And think of the main things then that you're fighting against. Is it your body? Is it your emotions? Is it relationships that you struggle with? Is it your finances? Is it career? Is it stress? Is it depression? What is it that you struggle with? What is it that you are struggling against? Gaining supremacy in any of these areas is going to come down to that very same thing, which is winning the daily struggles in which life is trying to keep you down and defeated. Now, I paint life this way, and I'm sorry, but life just does it to us, man. Life brings very hard times. And in a sense, it just kind of feels like at times that life is trying to keep us back. Life is trying to put us down. And so that's what we struggle against. But as I said, ultimately, the struggle is against yourself. We're going to see more about how that works, but we've got to build up a stronger you. We've got to change the way you see things. We got to get you to the place where you start winning these daily battles and maintain that supremacy. The more of the battles that you win, the more you're guaranteed that you're going to win the overall war. And that victory means you're going to be the dominator in every area of your life. That is a noble goal. That's what you should be striving for. And this has nothing to do with pride or ego, man. You should want to dominate every area of your life. Every area of your life, you should have the supremacy in. And maybe you won't ever get there, but you should die trying. It's the obligation, as I've often said, that you owe to yourself. To win in these daily struggles means you've got to get stronger. We know that, right? I've said that enough times. But, beyond that, you've got to improve your technique for how you win in life. It's one thing to be stronger. It's another thing to have good technique. We understand getting stronger, but improving technique is really where a lot of people miss out. Technique is a skillful or efficient way of doing or achieving something. That's what technique is. It's a skillful way in which you create your desired ends, a skillful way in which you combat life. Let's take, for example, a MMA fighter. They can be strong, but then have weak technique. And good technique is what wins most battles. I'm not a student of the UFC when I say this, but I've at least known this much, that in the history of mixed martial arts, and particularly in the UFC, when it first started, the family that was dominating everything was a family from Brazil called the Gracies, and they were jiu-jitsu masters. And there was the one guy, of course, last name Gracie, I can't remember his first name, but he was beating everybody. I mean, he was beating guys who'd come over from professional wrestling. He was beating big dudes, muscular dudes, guys who could box, and he was pretty scrawny. He was thin. He was not a big guy at all. He'd come out there with a little, like karate outfit, gi on, and his black belt, and he would beat all of them. because of his technique in jiu-jitsu. So he could subdue, he could, twist these guys up. So strength wasn't all that important in that regard. I'm sure this guy had strength, but he had technique, and technique is what did it. Here's some techniques that you are going to have to improve in. This is what we're going to cover in this series. Number one, the technique of self-talk. Self-talk, what you talk about to yourself. Number two, the technique of visualization, the images that occupy your mind. Number three, the technique of thought control, the way you understand things. Number four, the technique of self-control, which is controlling your reactions. And number five, the technique of self-discipline, which is getting yourself to do the things you don't want to do when you need to do them, even if you don't feel like it. And self-talk is where we're starting, is probably the most important technique to develop because it's the foundation to all others. I find that if I can get people to just dominate their self-talk, all the other things that they need to do with their mind, whether visualization, self-control, or whatever, it becomes so much easier. It's that constant flow of conversation in your head that determines everything. Because that's where your self-support should come from. That's where your self-edification should come from. And you'll find it easier then to visualize things, meditate, control your emotional responses once you get your self-talk under control. Most people's self-talk is not that way. It's not supportive. It's not self-edifying. It's the opposite. We tend to react to things like we do, fly off the handle, as we say, because we're already in a state of anxiety. We're already in a state of frustration. We're already sad. We're already angry. So it doesn't take much to set us off, right? Well, what created that state of anxiety, frustration, anger, or sadness? It's our self-talk. It's the constant dialogue that's going on between our ears. Therefore, the more we work on our self-talk, the less these things are going to have predominance. The less these things are going to have predominance. Predominance means being in greater number, a greater amount. Something that is predominant is in greater number. And that's what happens when we don't control our self-talk. Because the greater the greater number of conversations going on within us are negative, they're destructive, and they're counterproductive. It's a numbers game. How much of your self-talk in the day, how much of it percentage-wise is devoted to self-destruction, non-edifying, counterproductive thinking, and how much of your self-talk is supportive and edifying and pushing you forward? Self-talk is everything. Self-talk is everything. To improve your technique, then, you're going to have to start directing your self-talk now. And that's going to require you being overly deliberate at first about this. But you can practice it. For example, although I love to listen to music and all that when I'm walking my dogs or, cleaning something up or making myself some food or whatever, I'll often turn that off. I'll turn music and things off so that I can use these times where I'm doing work that doesn't require a whole lot of thought, and I use it to create conversations, intentional conversations in my head, right? And I'll literally be walking the dogs or doing something, and I'll start having an intentional, self-created conversation in my head about positivity. And it can sound very stale or whatever. But the point is I'm training my mind to have conversations. And the more I do, then when I get engaged in things throughout the day, I'll start to recognize when I get off of that. I'll start to recognize when the conversations start to turn sour. And I'll be able to bridle those things and bring them back under control. This is the importance of self-talk. And so I would encourage you to do the same. Use those opportunities when there's not, when you're doing things that don't require a lot of thought, like again, cleaning or cooking or whatever, and use those to create deliberate conversations in your head to start to train yourself to talk to yourself the way you should be spoken to, and talk to yourself in the most regal, noble terms that you can, not blowing your ego up. I'm not talking about that, but affirm yourself. You can acknowledge where you are. You might be struggling right now. You might be overweight. You might be this. You might be that. Acknowledge those things. Don't lie to yourself. but say, this is the last it's ever going to be. This is the least it's ever going to be. I'm growing from here. With every step I take, with everything that I do, I am moving forward. I'm not afraid of hard work. I'm not afraid of other people. I'm not afraid of what resists me. My goals do not intimidate me. I'm excited. I'm excited about my goals. I have all the power I'll ever need to achieve them. I will not remain where I am. Self-created, intentional, self-talk conversations that you start to build in your mind, and those things will start to carry out throughout your day, and guarantee you, man, it's going to produce some change in your life. Can you dig it? Hope you can.